Namo Buddhaya. Good morning. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV program. I am Lisa Chu. Today, we begin our program with a sermon given by Dr. Chandana of the United States. His sermon is on Samaditi Sutta, the discourse on right view. This is the third and final portion of his sermon. Here is Venerable Dr. Bhante Chandana.
What is the knife? Wisdom. Dig through the anthill. You're going to see a lot of things come up. And now we are digging. And we see passion or lust, raga. He removes the underlying drive for having dislike or resistance, patigha. And he completely uproots from his heart the underlying drive for bearing the conceit, I am. Asmimana. That conceit is and has been and is going to continue to be the death and destruction of many a meditator in this path, on this path. Conceit. So many people will leave this body despite the fact that they have come to the Dhamma. Why? Because the hold that conceit has on the heart is so tremendous. Their trust and faith in the Asmimana is far greater than the trust and faith and confidence in the Dhamma. Dhamma is not something out there that's faceless, this and that. And yeah, I worship the Dhamma, or I pay refuge, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I pay respect to the Dhamma. It's not like that. When push comes to shove and you are living through a difficult moment in your life, decisions have to be made. Are you choosing kusala or akusala? Are you choosing the Dhamma or adhamma? When you are not choosing what is Dhamma, you are choosing asmimana, meaning you are choosing adhamma. Now that can take any kind of coloration you want. But basically, whatever comes natural, that's another thing that people use. Habitually, that's what you're used to. Well, habitually, you're used to the kilesas, period. Not wisdom. That's not your habit. Wisdom is not, it doesn't come naturally. You have to work to get wisdom. Ignorance works naturally. Conceit works naturally. Mara works naturally. Underline, quotation marks, naturally. Why? Because they're easy. They're easy. When you're sitting to meditate, what is more difficult to do? To sit or to get up any moment? You have a tiny little scratch, an itch, a pain, a tiny little something. Oh, there's a sound. Oh, it's coming from the kitchen. What is that? Oh, maybe that's a mouth. Let me get up. It's the first thing that gets to be sacrificed. You're sit. You're calm. You're tranquil. That's the first thing that is thrown out into the traffic. Out the window. It is harder, however, to sit through that. Why? Because you're going against Mara, you're going against conceit. That's why many people cannot become students these days. True students of the Dhamma require us to be humble. How many humble people do you know? Those are, if you find them, those are the ones who have the necessary requisite to be a student of the Dhamma. But we are ensuring that we never get to that moment of or place of humility. So we are locking ourselves out of being true students of the Dhamma. So we add more and more nonsense. Data, nonsense data about the Dhamma. And continue to fester in the cesspit of our ignorance. and there goes another life. Next one, you're going to probably be, if you're lucky, a four-legged animal somewhere, if you're lucky. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here, within this very life of his. It is in this manner, friends, that a noble disciple is said to possess right view, the one whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. In listening to these words spoken by the Venerable Sariputta, the fellow bhikkhus became quite delighted as they exclaimed, "Sadhu, friend." Now we get to the Four Noble Truths directly. So this section is headed by, the heading is Understanding the Four Noble Truths. Excuse me. Then the bhikkhus proceeded to ask the Venerable Sariputta a further question and said, so they're taking the opportunity to keep asking, yeah, but Bhante, what about, not Bhante, because in those days, because Lord Buddha was still alive, bhikkhus would address each other as avuso, even if the other bhikkhu was 40 years their senior in Vasas, they would call each other avuso, means, friend. But on his deathbed, Lord Buddha told them to avoid any complications with most people because people would be offended. And he even thought about that. He said, okay, whoever is senior to someone, even by an hour of vassa, like ordination, and upasampada, I mean, then they need to call that person who's their senior Bhante. While the other one, if he chooses to call the other one who's less in seniority Bhante, that's up to them. But otherwise, they would call them avuso. So sometimes in the suttas you will see Bhante, maybe here and there, but generally it's avuso. Otherwise, Bhante would always go in reference to Lord Buddha or Bhagavan. Anyhow, understanding the Four Noble Truths. Then the bhikkhus proceeded to ask the Venerable Sariputta a further question and said, but friend, could there be another way of describing a noble disciple other than one who possesses right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma? Yes, friends, there could be another way of describing a noble disciple. So it's not just having right view, there's different requirements, different ways of identifying a person having right view. And that's why Venerable Sariputta is going into each of these compartments of the Dhamma and pulling out these important frameworks of each. And now we're going to go to the one of the biggest, the Four Noble Truths, and indicate why having that understanding is considered right view as well. Whenever, friends, a noble disciple looks at suffering, he does so carefully as he comes to see and understand it, just like he said in the first paragraph with unskillful behaviors. He said he looks at the unskillful act or behavior as he comes to see and understand it. These two terms are very important. Seeing and understanding. Sometimes it's called Vidya and Vimutti. Sometimes they're called Jnana Dassana. To be able to see and understand what it means to be liberated, released, that requires a depth of comprehension that is direct to you, personal. So it is not like an aha moment only. Somebody giving you something. It is very personal. No one can tell you it. Similarly, he looks at the origin and cause of suffering, which he does carefully. as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the cessation and ending of suffering, which he does so carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. And he looks at the path that leads to the cessation and very ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. If you notice, these things are not done in a rush manner, which is what today's society is described as. Everyone is in a rush. We're speeding. Even if we're standing still, we are speeding. And by that same token, we want to, because we have this, and where does the speed come in, or come from? What is the root of that desire to keep speeding away, rushing? It comes from tanha, craving, which has ignorance as its own parent. Because ignorance comes in, or willfully ignoring the fact that, what am I doing? Why am I rushing? So long as we are rushing, that's what I'm trying to say. So long as we are pushing and shoving and rushing our way through understanding of Dhamma, we will not come to understand the Dhamma. We will not understand the Four Noble Truths. We will never appreciate dukkha. Somebody who doesn't appreciate and look carefully at dukkha will never, categorically stated, will never come to understand and appreciate samudaya. Will never understand, therefore, and appreciate nirodha. Will not even come close to even seeing, let alone practicing, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth Noble Truth, the Magga. So you need to really look at dukkha, your dukkha. You need to acknowledge, instead of rushing away, you need to acknowledge it. But what we're doing is we are rushing, we're in a hurry. That's why you go on retreats and you see everybody's rushing to attain to the first jhana or second or fourth, or actually attain nibbana. It's become like a diploma. So many people today go on retreats wanting to attain liberation just like that. Why? Because they're on a tight schedule. Come on. As if Nibbana is supposed to happen on a retreat. That's how it's listed. I mean, that's how it works, right? The Dhamma works like that, right? Well, hold on, excuse me, what happened to your life? The majority part of your life, your existence. That's the university. That's where you're actually getting the opportunity for an education of the Dhamma. But in order for you to really understand, or even come close to understanding dukkha, you need to give it the time of day. And that is called sati. Sati. Look at the neutral things more so than you're eager to look at the highly pronounced, loud experiences of pain or joy. Well, what happened in the between? Majority of it was neutral experiences, bland, but not that colorful. You mean to say life was not happening there? Yeah. That's why many people actually want to stay with passion. That's why anybody who pushes for, oh, I'm a very passionate person, Bhante. I love passion. Okay, stay in dukkha, my friend. Stay there. Skulk in the realm of Mara. That's stupid. That's a person who's ignorant, wanting to attain Nibbana at the same time. They don't work. Try to turn on the light switch while telling the darkness in the room to not leave. See if you can convince the darkness to not leave. As you turn on the light switch, which has a light bulb that works and there's power coming in. It won't work. Similarly with the Dhamma. So we need to be able to slow things down. Not doing a retreat necessarily, but from you getting up in the, at the kitchen table, getting up, well, a lot happened before you even touch the table, so you can push yourself back with your chair, let's say, to get up, to rise up. Did you notice your hands touching the table? Which part of the hands? And when you're pushing, are your legs or one particular leg pushing more than the other? Is there sound being, produced because of those actions? And let's hold on a second. What instigated this? Mano sanchetana. It was triggered. There was a desire. There was a need. There was a nutriment, nourishment. That's why we love Mano sanchetana. We love making or having intentions. We love thinking. That's why it's very boring when you somehow end up in upekka. The habitual part of the brain comes in and says, what are we doing next? We have to do something. What is this? Oh, let me have this. Boom, all of a sudden, oop, 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 and all of a sudden the hindrance shows up of restlessness. Uddacha shows up. But it doesn't show up like in Niagara. It starts slowly, boom, 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 because you're leaking. You're not strong enough to withstand and push and close that door on them. Because you don't understand nutriment, how subtle it is. Because deep down, if you go, there is craving behind the Mano Sanchetana, just like there's craving behind wanting to make contact, whether it's contact to an object of the mind, concept, memory, thought, idea, some principle, or relationships, even Dhammic relationships, but it's keeping the mind active. Digging deep and you will find the Anusaya. Ooh, I like this thought. This is my thought. Thank you very much. What? Asmimana much? Conceit am is there, lurking about. Well, how are you going to notice if you're rushing? You can't. That's why we need to seclude ourselves. That's why we need to isolate ourselves, even if it's a small portion of the day. Isolate yourself from your technology around you. Or carry sati, that is your mobile seclusion cell. Wherever you go, sati, if you bring sati there, that is your kuti that you're carrying with you. No one can see it. That's the fun part. You can be in the middle of a very busy building with people typing away on their computers, sending emails, this and that, noise, this and that. If you have sati, you are in full lockdown. Nothing is coming in, the hindrances. And there's only one thing that can arise, and there is wisdom and understanding, seeing, vidya, knowing. In this manner, too, friends, he would be declared a noble disciple, one who is said to possess the right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. Excuse me. Now, friends, what is meant by suffering? What is the origin and arising of suffering? What is the ending and cessation of suffering? And what is the path that leads to the cessation and very ending of suffering? Rebirth is suffering. Getting sick is suffering. Aging and getting old is suffering. Death is suffering. Grief, lamentation, pain, depression, and a sense of loss or anguish are all suffering. Associating with whatever is disagreeable or disliked is suffering. Separating from what one likes is suffering. Not getting what one likes is also suffering. In other words, all that the five grabbing aggregates try to latch onto is suffering. Five aggregates. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Material form, feeling, perceptions, memories, habitual tendencies or drives, sankharas, and consciousness or sense awareness. We latch on to them. Why? Because it gives us some existential coherence to feel that we exist. A part of us exists. Here's an experiment you can try. Imagine everyone you know in your life turns their back on you. Everyone. That means you take your phone and all the contacts in the contact section, everyone you know, I mean really know, suddenly don't want to talk to you. They cut their contact with you. And you go outside, and you so happens to be, basically, you happen to be in a place where you don't know anyone. You just landed in a foreign country. You don't know anyone. Or you lost your phone and there's no access to any technology. So there goes that. How will be your life after that moment? Because we like to continue. And that continuation occurs because of our desire to grab onto these five aggregates. That gives us meaning. That's why when rupa fails, the body is aching and it's falling apart. The legs don't work, this and that. You're on a wheelchair. You're not even identifiable. Maybe you're a burn victim. Or you lost your memory. But okay, form is out the door. What's left? Well, feeling is there. I can still feel pleasure, pain, neutral. We don't like that. Pleasure and pain. What about perception? Yeah, I have memories. Okay, so I can latch on to that. Ask any elderly person, senior citizen, any old person. You'll see sankharas. You'll see vijnana still. Anything, it's like driftwood that we're holding on to in the middle of the ocean. It's a shipwreck, you know. All this is called suffering, friends. And what is the origin and arising of suffering? Because Venerable Sariputta is still explaining the Four Noble Truths. By the way, we'll end at the end of this section. We'll resume next week after that. And what is the origin and arising of suffering? It is this ongoing thirst that leads to repeated rebirth. While one seeks constant excitement and enjoyment, finding delight here and there, that is to say, being constantly thirsty for sensual pleasures, constantly thirsty for re-becoming, and constantly thirsty for non-becoming. Excuse me. These are the different forms of craving, by the way. This then is called the origin and arising of suffering, friends. And what about the ending and cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and dispassion, cessation, the giving up, the relinquishment, the release and abandoning of that very constant thirst for sensual pleasures, the constant thirst for re-becoming and the constant thirst for non-becoming. This is called the ending and cessation of suffering, friends. So even if you want to have, lights out at the end of a difficult life, I want out. I just don't want to exist anymore. There's nothing noble about it. You're just a nihilist. It's just as bad as somebody wanting to be reborn in the middle of a heavenly harem, right? In the Talatingsa heaven, like we saw some weeks ago. Sakka had built himself a huge mansion with plenty of prostitutes, basically. Divine. What a miserable life. What a terrible, terrible waste of life. Why? Because you're still craving. There's still suffering, albeit the possibility for pain is far less over there, but it's a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, it might be billions of years, by the way. Sooner or later, it will run out. And you're going to fall on your behind, as they say, into the middle of terrible situations, terrible birth. And it's going to be like a dream, even though it might have been many, many hundreds of millions of years. Too late, too bad, you're not in it. Time's up, gotta go. I might be oversimplifying here or presenting it in a very grotesque manner, but basically that's what it is. We've gone through the heavenly realm so many times we can't even keep track of, if you have the memory. Sometimes I tell students, I wish it would be possible for everyone to see their past lives. It would make it so much easier for everybody. The terror that you would recall from your time in the hell realms. And then the terror that occurred in your heart when you realized as a deva that you're about to fall from that glorious state of a divine being and end up in, I don't know, in the boondocks of Calcutta without food, in a family of 16 kids, and you're being pushed outside by your parents, no school, so that you can go and earn a living. Wait a minute, I was sitting by Sutka over there. What happened? I was enjoying all kinds of sexual pleasures. What is this? What is this body? It smells. What is? Yes. No wonder we can't remember, because it's full of disappointments. But if we could, it would make it so much easier for us to quickly wake up and put the effort to get ourselves off the hook of Mara, of death. Because there's no salvation, there's no freedom by seeking a rebirth in a heavenly realm, even the Brahma realms. We saw a few weeks ago, right, with Baka, the Brahma god, how he was drenched in ignorance. He was being fooled by Mara. I mean, how pathetic is that? You work doing good deeds for countless eons and you end up as a Brahma god only to be fooled by Mara? Are you kidding me? Well, you be a slave to your senses, that's what you will be. Even though you're working under the guise of basically doing kusala kamma, good, wholesome, merit-making actions. That's why Lord Buddha always discouraged his bhikkhus, his students, to merely seek a heavenly birth, or at any point. Lord Sayadaw talks about this a lot. He's like, leave all that nonsense behind. Attain freedom. Stick to one object of meditation. Understand anicca, dukkha, anatta. Practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Understand dukkha and cut yourself free from this whole mass of suffering that exists in all of the 31 realms of existence. It's a nightmare to be desiring or ending up in a heavenly realm. It's a nightmare when you think of it in Dhammic terms. A noble disciple will never seek truly a life in a heavenly realm over cutting free totally, because for them the hell realm or the heavenly realms basically are not so different. Why? Because their understanding is far deeper. And what about the ending and cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and dispassion, cessation and the giving up and the relinquishment, the release, and I think I read that. This is called the ending and cessation of suffering, friends. And what is the path that leads to the cessation and the very ending of suffering? It is none other than the application and practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, right view, right intentional thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And when, friends, a noble disciple looks at suffering, he does so carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the origin and cause of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the cessation and ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. And he looks at the path that leads to the cessation and the very ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Then he abandons and lets go of the underlying drive for passion or lust. He removes the underlying drive. Underlying drive, again, here is a reference for anusayas, latent tendencies, sometimes translated also. Anusaya for having dislike or resistance, and he completely uproots from his heart the underlying drive for bearing the conceit, I am. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here within this very life of his. Again, gaining true knowledge within himself means no one has given that to you, and no one can take that away from you. Lord Buddha could not, even if he wanted to, could not take anyone's realization away from them. Why? Because he never gave it to them in the first place. The person understands, realizes this. Anyone who thinks that their teacher is the one who gives them attainments, and that's why they huddle around such a teacher, despite the abuse and this and that, or despite the fact that they see that there's no Dhamma there. Many people latch on, just like Pancha Upadana Khanda. This time they added another sixth aggregate, and that is the teacher. Like, please don't leave us, don't let you. Why? Why? I've looked at their eyes and I'm looking, I was, what is the driving force? And I see greed and craving. Why? Because they think, because the teacher said, oh, you're an anagami, oh, you're an arahant, oh, you're a sakadagama, you're sotapanna. If I disagree with the teacher, what does that do to my attainment? This might sound funny, but there are thousands of people like that. Thousands. I know hundreds of them personally. Terrible. That's why we're doing this, so that they could actually hear Lord Buddha's words. Venerable Sariputta's words. They could wake up and not waste another life living like idiots. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here within this very life of his. It is in this manner, friends, that a noble disciple is said to possess right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate. Someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma. The one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. In listening to these words spoken by the Venerable Sariputta, the fellow bhikkhus became quite delighted as they exclaimed, Sadhu, friend. And we go, so sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. As we stop here for today, we'll continue from the section entitled Aging and Death, and we see how Venerable Sariputta, as always, beautifully delineates the role of sammaditi in the proper understanding of aging and death, which is everyone's path. We are guaranteed at least one of them, death part. It's good to have a guarantee, at least that. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions, comments. I hope you're enjoying Okay, so please be mindful that as I gave the example of some students of the Dhamma or people who practice one form or another, whether it is Dhamma or Adhamma, it's a different story. But what is important to always consider, really, the truth, valuable truth to consider, is that the person might go on living a life and not even come close to tasting true Dhamma. But for all intents and purposes, those gathered around them might tell them, cherry picking the Dhamma, giving them this and that to fit in, almost like a toxic relationship, toxic spouse, toxic husband, or toxic friend, toxic wife, who says certain things strategically in a way to keep you on the hook. And it's crucial for us to look at the role of right view, samadhi. There was a reason why Lord Buddha established that as the very first. You get that correct, the samadhi portion correct of the Noble Eightfold Path, you are set for success. And we're seeing here, it's not just having one particular view. No, it's reflective on several different of the principle frameworks found within the Dhamma. You cannot choose the wrong action if you have the right view. Why? Because right view is like the eyes. If you have eyes, it's like almost the headlights of a car at night. If you have eyes, you will know where you're going. But if you switch off the headlights of the car, you don't know where you're going at night. And there are no lights, unfortunately, around you, street lights. You will slam, you're going to actually fall down a cliff. And that falling down, we can resemble that to living life without Dhamma. Even though you might be living a whole entire life thinking that you're practicing. And that is an unfortunate reality we see all around us. Not one particular group, but throughout the Buddhist world, we see this. I'm not even going to talk about other traditions, other religions. So, it's important for us to bear that in mind, and the role of samadhi in all of these different aspects of our lives. Ultimately, it is all about our practice and our understanding and learning through our interactions with life, consciously, by slowing things down and not rushing. So, if there are no questions, let us conclude by transferring some merits. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu lokasasana. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu desana. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu mamparati. May you all be well. May the blessings of the Triple Gem, the Dhamma, of course the Buddha, and the purity of the Sangha, the energy left behind by the Arahants, still strong as the energy left behind, the signature of Lord Buddha's energy is strong. That's why the Dhamma still vibrates with the help of the Devas, many of whom sat at the feet of, or touched the ground with their divine feet in front of Lord Buddha, listened to, heard, discourse after discourse, who know the discourses by heart, many of the devas, with their protection also. May you feel yourself strong. May your practice strengthen and find more and more strength every single day, more drive to complete the task. In this life, Titeva Dhamme, be fearless. This is a warrior's path. This is the head of this path. Lord Buddha was known as the unvanquishable conqueror. And the Dhamma he taught is the same. So we have nothing to fear. Slow things down, be fearless, and go all the way. Stop selling yourself short. And the Dhamma is there to guide you. Sukhi hotu, and until next time.
Blessed One, the greatest of mankind, Thou gracious Master, filled with love divine, gracious Thy light, so sweet, so great, so pure, Thou mighty light, Thou blessed One so dear. Lord, at Thy feet I seek myself to learn the wisdom of Thy light and law. Plainly I see the truth which Thou dost teach. Sorrow and pain and self shall be no more. Into my heart there comes a lasting peace. Within my mind there glows a wondrous light. All tears and sorrow, doubt and worry cease. For truth and joy Thy glorious teaching brings. Take my refuge in the glorious Lord. No other shelter shall I need. I take my refuge in the law and thunder, which freedom brings and light forevermore. Which freedom brings and light forever.
Our next item is with Dr. Bhante Punaji. He talks about Buddhism, analyzing modern science, psychology, and psychotherapy, etc. We have already presented several talks by Venerable Dr. Punaji. Today, we are presenting the second and final part of his talk entitled Awakening from the Dream of Existence. Please listen to it carefully and grasp the deep meaning of his talk.
Emotions wanted not only those comfortable things, the emotions also wanted the nuclear weapons to kill and destroy. Now people have frightened, worried that if there is a nuclear war, that is the end of the world. You see? What does this mean? That the intellect or the head has become the slave of the heart, the emotions. The thinking part has become the slave of the emotional part. This is why with all the advancements in modern science, we are still filled with crime, filled with wars, filled with terrorism, filled with neurosis, filled with psychosis. Why? If our intellect has improved, why all these things? This is why the Buddha pointed out what we have to do is to get the head to dominate our mind, not the heart. This is the main thing in Buddhism. The teaching of the Buddha is to get the head to dominate our mind, not the heart. And if the heart has to calm down, the emotions we have to get rid of. What is an emotion? An emotion is a disturbance of not only the mind, it is a disturbance of the whole body and mind. It is not a normal thing. It is an abnormal thing. The normal thing is to stay calm and think properly. That's the normal thing. The abnormal thing is to get angry or become passionate and lustful, or maybe start worrying and crying and lamenting, become frightened. These are abnormal things, and today, according to Hans Selye, who wrote about stress, he called this a sickness. He pointed out that if the stress is going on, there are 3 stages in the stress. One is called the alarm reaction. That is like when there is an alarm reaction in a building or a house, or you hear a sound and then you begin to rush out of the house. Now that kind of alarm reaction is going on when, say, someone becomes very sick or dies or something happens in the environment, then the alarm reaction occurs. That is sometimes called the fight and flight response. Either you try to fight or you try to run away. That's the alarm reaction. Then, if this problem continues beyond this alarm reaction, if it continues for a long time, we come to the next stage called the stage of resistance. That means the body is now beginning to function in the wrong way. And that functioning means sickness. The body becomes sick as a result. The body becomes sick and the body becomes uncomfortable and the mind begins to start worrying and unhappy state. And the third stage is, if it goes on further, it is called the stage of exhaustion. And when it comes to the stage of exhaustion, that person might even die. Or maybe even commit suicide. All these things happen, which is not the normal thing. These are abnormal things. So stress can come in these different forms in this way. And that is why the stress has to be stopped. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that the only way to stop is first become conscious. And this is why we have what is today called the Noble Eightfold Path. And that Noble Eightfold Path begins with what? What is the beginning? There are 8 steps on the path. The first step is what is called Samma Ditti, which is today translated as right understanding or right view. That is really to become conscious of this problem. But simply by understanding, you have not become really conscious. You have become aware of the problem. You are aware that there is a problem here. But you are not fully conscious of the problem. You are only, it's a theoretical understanding that there is a problem. That is Samma Ditti. And then you understand what is called the 4 Noble Truths. What are these 4 Noble Truths? Excuse me. The 4 Noble Truths is to talk about dukkha, which is today translated as suffering, which is that stress, the cause of this suffering, which is today called craving. It's not craving, it is the emotion. It is the emotional reaction that is creating this problem. Emotion. And how to end the problem is to get rid of the emotions. Now, Sigmund Freud thought emotions cannot be got rid of, because he thought the emotions are coming from inside. Because in the body, there are organs that help in producing anger, fears, worries, anxieties, even the sexual glands producing lust, passion. So you see, the body, there are these things that produce the emotions. So he thought, we cannot get rid of emotions. So he thought the only way to get rid of emotions is not getting rid of emotions, he called it sublimation. And sublimation is not getting rid of emotions, it is using the energy behind the emotion to be sent along the right channels. Instead of satisfying your emotions in a destructive way, you try to use a constructive way of doing it. You do it in a socially acceptable way that does not harm other people or create problems. That is what he calls sublimation. But you know, fortunately, a new kind of psychology came into being. Which came after Freud. That is called cognitive psychology. What is this thing called cognitive psychology? They pointed out it is true that you have all the organs to produce anger or maybe sexual desires or maybe all the worries and fears and things like that. But those organs will not come into the working state until the thinking part begins to interpret your circumstance in a certain way. That means the cognitive process begins to act before the emotional arousal. So it is the cognitive process that interprets what is going on outside in the world, gives meaning to our circumstances. And if we learn to interpret our circumstances in the proper way, the anger will not be aroused. Or even the sexual desires will not be aroused. So now there is a thing called cognitive psychotherapy. What they are trying to do is whenever people are having problems, psychological problems, they try to change the way they interpret their circumstances. In a way, this is what Sigmund Freud tried to do also. Because the way we interpret our circumstances depend on the way we learn to think when we were children. Our childhood experiences and the way we interpreted our circumstances as a child begins to affect the way we interpret our circumstances as adults. So this is why Freud wanted to recall the past. And by thinking about the past, we can, with the adult mind, look at it and see that this is only a childish way of thinking. And you can change your way of thinking. It's the same thing but in a different way. So, although at that time Freud didn't understand it fully, but the later cognitive psychologists began to understand this better, and they are using this. And the most interesting thing is, there is a book of verses that you may be familiar with, which is coming from the teachings of the Buddha. It's called Dhamma. You know that word. The first verse in the Dhammapada, what does the Buddha say? Mano pubbangama dhamma. Mano means that cognitive process. I told you that perception is followed by mano. It is the thinking part of the brain. Interpretation of the circumstance, which is what is called the cognitive process. Pubbangama means precedes, comes before. The thinking part comes before the emotional and the active part. Mano pubbangama dhamma. The thinking part precedes all experience. And he says, Manasache pasannena, manasache paduttena vasativa karotiva. If a person interprets the circumstances in the wrong way, that person might become angry or greedy and then act in the wrong way, and as a result producing unhappiness to oneself as well as others. But if a person begins to interpret the circumstances in the right way, then that person will act in the right way, and as a result, everyone will be happy. That is what that verse is saying. So in other words, the Buddha saw this secret behind controlling the mind. And that is how he became a Buddha. Becoming a Buddha is learning to gain full control over the emotions, to completely get rid of three things: lobha, dosa and moha, which is today translated in various ways, but I like to translate it as lust, hate and delusion. Lust, hate and delusion refers to the emotions. It is by getting rid of emotions. A Buddha is a person who has got rid of all self-centered emotions. That is the meaning of becoming a Buddha. And all the self-centered emotions carry one very important thing: the self, the I. I want this, or I hate this. The I is the delusion. This is why we talk about awakening from the dream of existence. Existence means I exist. I exist is a delusion. And a delusion means it is not even a concept. A concept is a rational concept. This is an emotional feeling. The self is an emotional feeling. It's not a rational concept. Even if we are fully convinced that there is no such thing as a self, still we feel the self. We cannot give up the idea of self. Because we are feeling the self, not just thinking self. The thinking came later. It is the feeling that came first. How did the feeling come? Of course, this is a long story. If I begin to start with that, I will need another few hours to explain this. So maybe if we get a chance later, I might be able to talk about it, but I leave this. Now it's almost 7:30, and the only thing is that we are dreaming. We are really unconscious. We are not fully conscious. That's why Sigmund Freud compared our mind to an iceberg. And the iceberg, only the tip of the iceberg comes up above the water, and the rest is under the water. In the same way, our consciousness is only a very subtle thing. We are mainly unconscious. We have to awaken from this dream that we are thinking, I am. It is only by awakening from this dream of existence. Because existence is a fallacy. It is called a static concept in a dynamic reality. The reality is dynamic, changing all the time. But existence is a static concept. We are thinking of existence where there is no real existence. You know, Charles Darwin, who spoke about what is called the theory of evolution, he saw this thing called life. What we call life is not a real life. What we call life is a chemical process. The chemical process means you are familiar with this thing called atoms and molecules. Now, a new kind of molecule came into being. All molecules are made of atoms. Atoms go together to form a molecule. But every molecule has a special property, how the molecule behaves. But this new kind of molecule came into being not because someone created it or did something. Everything that happens in this world happens only due to the presence of the necessary conditions. When certain conditions are present, it happens. This is what is called determinism. Determinism means that every occurrence in the world is determined by the presence of the necessary conditions. It was in the 18th century that people in the West became aware of this thing called determinism. That is when science began. That was the time of Isaac Newton, Galileo, and all these various scientists who came up. And that age began to be called the age of enlightenment. They called it the age of enlightenment. That is the time when people began to open their eyes. And otherwise, people thought that everything, when there is an earthquake or a hurricane or a tornado or whatever it is, it happened because of God, God doing it. But it is this age of enlightenment that people began to realize that whatever occurs in the world, whether it is an earthquake or hurricane or whatever, always occurs due to the presence of the necessary conditions. That is what is called determinism. And that is what the Buddha brought into the world long before that age of enlightenment. He called it Paticca Samuppada, today translated as dependent origination. They are dependent on the conditions. That's what it means. So that is really the determinism. So it is because of this determinism that this thing called life came into being, when a new kind of molecule was formed, and this molecule had this ability to absorb atoms from the surroundings and produce molecules of its own kind. When they were able to produce new molecules, the number of molecules keep increasing. But there was another law, natural law, that is that everything that is integrated is subject to disintegration. That is what the Buddha called anicca. Sabbe sankhara anicca. So there were two processes going on at the same time, a building up process and a breaking down process. Two processes. Today the scientists have two names for these two processes. The building up process is called anabolism, and the breaking down process is called catabolism. And both together is called metabolism. So what we call life is really that process called metabolism. And it is this process that gradually began to build up what is called a cell. And the cells came together to form tissues, and the tissues came together to form organs. Organs came together to form systems, and the systems came together to form organisms, and the organisms kept on developing to produce plants, animals, and ultimately the human being came into being. When the human being came into being, this gradual process also began to develop what is called a brain. It was simply the nervous system that gradually begins to develop a thing called the brain. And with the coming of the brain, proper development, the human brain came into being. And it is this human brain which has what is called a cerebrum, which begins to think and reason out. And so we have what is called modern science, the scientific technology and all the wonderful things. You see, so it is this human brain that can ultimately become aware of this whole process, which is called the evolution. And not only that, become aware of this problem which Charles Darwin saw as the struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest. And the struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest, the Buddha saw the struggle for existence, but no one really survives. What survives is not the individual. What survives is the generation. It is the generation that keeps on going, producing more and more. Every human being that is born, what does the human being do? Even the animals, everyone is doing the same thing. What? They grow, reproduce and die. Grow, reproduce, die. What is the purpose? It was Alan Watts who began to say that we are just tubes. The tube, one end of the tube you put food in and the other end of the tube it goes out. So it's a tube. But this tube continues to produce other tubes and die. That's all that is going on. And that living itself is a very difficult thing. Even if a child is born, what does the parents do? They try to send the child to school. For what purpose? So that the child will learn something and be able to get a job where they can find food, clothing, shelter, and keep on living. But they also die. Before they die, they will produce more children, and then that is how it goes on. What is the purpose? They can only suffer. That is what is going on. What is left is suffering and nothing else. So why continue suffering? This is why the Buddha said the main thing is to stop this struggle for existence. That will be the end of all the problems. We are only creating problems. Every time a child is produced, we are creating a problem. That child cannot be happy. He has to go to school. No one likes to go to school. And even when they get a job, they don't like to do the job. They don't like to get up early morning and go and do jobs. So it's not really a pleasure that we are thinking of. We are only trying to plug our ears with what is called music and then try to forget about that. It's an escape from the reality of suffering. We are only trying to run away from the reality into a world which is a fantasy. We are running away from reality into an imaginary fantasy. That is all that we are trying to do.
That's all for today. Should you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us at info@buddhadhammatv.com. Our team is dedicated to bringing you the noble, serene, and profound teachings of the Buddha, guiding you on your spiritual journey with his timeless wisdom. Thank you for joining us. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.